22nd, or I'm sorry, 26, 2018 meeting of the Burien Planning Commission. I call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Moving on, next item on the agenda is old business. First item is the public hearing. So it's a continued public hearing on text amendments to the Burien Municipal Code Title 19 Zoning Code. It's being continued from the September 12th, 2018 meeting. First person signed up is Sandra Locklear.
Just for the record, we're being recorded tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so since so many Planning Commission members are absent tonight, excused, how do you manage a quorum then, or a vote? How does that work?
A minimum of 4 commissioners are required.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Planning Commission and citizens of Burien. I've lived in Burien for 44 years and am a retired Highline School District music educator and professional musician. Recently, I came across one of my parent letters, which in part read, September 17, 2001. Dear parents, guardians of Madrona Elementary first graders, welcome to our open house. Unfortunately, I'm not able to meet you this evening as I'm attending a Burien City Council meeting along with some neighbors to help make our street safer for kids. And that's what I'm still doing. I'm keeping our neighborhood safe and ensuring democratic processes. My comments tonight are not against technology or broadband, but to ensure it happens here in a way that truly sustains and will benefit Burien for the next 7 generations. It's unreasonable to expect non-citizen experts to review yet another round of telecom changes to Code 19.50 that were posted online and through the mail on September 21st, only 5 days before the second public hearing occurred. Planning Commission, please extend this public hearing to October 5th to properly allow 14 days for the public to view this additional round of telecom changes and prepare our comments. From watching the 217 and 218 Planning Commission videos, it's obvious that the Planning Commission seemed perplexed at times, which is understandable since the information given to you was sketchy and misleading. Does the Planning Commission know exactly what is being mandated by the FCC and what is being rushed through at the behest of Ogden, Murphy & Wallace, the law firm profiting from giving preemptive advice? The bottom line is, while lawsuits are already bursting at the seam nationally and the FCC is considering even more vast state overreach, Burien City's planners are rushing this process without informed consent or informed choices. For instance, on June 27, 2018, the Planning Commission asked Mr. Davis how Verizon could proceed with small cell installation prior to code being updated to accommodate the installations. Mr. Davis replied that it's because a 10-year Verizon franchise had already been granted the previous November 2017, and everything was done on a handshake. Planning Commission, with all due respect, you should have seen the looks on your faces. As a 44 years long resident of Burien dedicated to my community, and as a sovereign human being with a soul, I do not give my consent or agreement to be party to handshakes or backdoor agreements that affect the welfare of my family or my neighborhood. Our taxes pay the salaries of our city employees, and we deserve the basic respect of providing for their livelihoods here. The Planning Commission must be aware of the corrupted process of citizen engagement around small cell installation that has been so well documented with letters and emails to various city officials. For instance, a vaguely worded notice of application and blurry map of node sites supplied by Verizon. One land use sign for an entire area with 16 or 17 nodes with justification that this was because there was only one application for each area. Not sending a notice of public hearing to official parties of record, and then sending out this latest round of changes by the telecoms just 5 days before today's public hearing. But the question still remained, if public correspondence is included in the project files, why weren't these same people offered the opportunity to verbally testify at the hearings? I've taken 5. After many inquiries that were disregarded by city staff and officials, only yesterday we learned why parties of record were not advised of the public hearings. It's because Burien's planning department is choosing to capitalize upon the distinction between a non-legislated Type 1 land reviews process, which requires a personal notice, and a legislated public hearing, which doesn't require personal notice. Therefore, the most critical requirement for spirited public debate is totally missing, which would be the people. So in order to speed up the shot clock or the timeline from application to approval to installation, city planners are using loopholes in various permitting process against its own citizens, and I'll say it against the people. Lead Burien planner Davis's behavior suggests that he must feel justified in rushing the installations, abusing the democratic process, and misleading our city council and planning commission through vague statements of reassurance that can be viewed on the Burien EMF Safety's YouTube channel. Is this how Burien conducts its business? Burien Incorporated shaking hands with Verizon Incorporated and imposing its will upon the people? Burien has no contract with Verizon, yet it's trying to push code changes that only benefit the telecoms at the expense of our health, our property values, the democratic process, and our futures. Planning Commission must be aware that currently there exists a proliferation of intrastate lawsuits in what is being called small cell civil wars. But due to the preemptive advice of Burien's small cell attorney firm, thoughtful code changes that would preserve local control over our poles and right-of-ways is being discarded in favor of beating the so-called shot clock. We've all had the wool pulled over our eyes. Whether to speed up the imaginary shot clock or possibly to ensure Mr. Davis's reputation as a long-term employee of the telecom industry before he came to Burien, the facts still remain that eliminating the Type 1 permitting process and giving the telecoms their way speeds up timelines, eliminates citizen input, eliminates setbacks, grants Mr. Davis full authority without oversight or citizen feedback to instantly approve batched applications, increases the number of small cells in our neighborhoods. None of this is acceptable, not a one. Planning Commissioners, thank you very much truly for your sacrifice of your time and your effort. The position of Burien residents for EMF safety is that the proper response to this mess is to deny the latest round of telecom code changes and extend this public hearing to October 5th to give citizens 14 days to review what the latest round of changes are from the telecoms. We also respectfully ask you to please recommend that Ordinance 679 granting Verizon a 10-year franchise to be scrapped until something more sustainable for the future of our city can be properly carved out, especially in light of all the current lawsuits. Repealing Ordinance 679 can be at the behest of our mayor. With the Planning Commission's backing, it can be appropriately discussed at the City Council public hearing. It's the right thing to do and what needs to happen. Please do not accept the Code 1950 changes. What will happen if our Planning Commission doesn't step up to slow down this reckless and ruinous course of action tonight? Are you really willing to take that risk at the expense of the facts here? Please choose the route of integrity, pointing to the highest ethical considerations that should be guiding this evening's decisions for the sake of our kids and their kids, instead of rushing things. Thank you for listening and for denying the latest round of these code changes that only benefit the corporations. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Here is the packet that we were expected to go through in 5 days and give feedback on. Thank you.
Next person on the list is Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell, 16640 10th Avenue Southwest. Got some prepared comments, and then I received an email that I think was very, very important. But let me just start off with this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak once more before you. I want to thank each one of you for volunteering your time for the betterment of Burien. Realizing the changes that need to be made to BMC 19.50 in regards to small cell facilities is definitely a daunting task. A major advantage you have as a commission are the resources and help of senior planners like Thera Johnson and others. Those are resources which the average Burien citizen like me has no real access to, unless prior experiences with city staff provides a background to where where we can access that information. Trying to sift through and make sense of 19.50 as well as the changes desired by Verizon, AT&T, and others is found in this packet here that I got 5 days before this meeting. Demands a basic understanding of what the code means. As a citizen, my time to understand is limited and therefore doesn't allow me an opportunity to be better informed without additional time. The pole outside our home in the South Lake Burien area, which was designated as Node 8, it would have been 30 feet from the windows of our living room and 40 feet to 2 bedrooms. I'm relieved to know Verizon withdrew their application, but I'm concerned about those neighborhoods where applications were granted. In regards to small cell, the democratic process in Burien is broken. Handshake agreements, no public discourse at crucial decision moments, a disregard for the public health, safety, and welfare, where we were told that the FCC had jurisdiction over 5G health issues, letters of notice of application that give very little background information, beginning small cell discussions clear back in January 2017, placing interests of wireless companies above its citizens by streamlining approval steps without any public input, and a feeling of total disregard about we as citizens in our own city. Also today, the FCC passed their order we've all been expecting. There's a lot of information in it. One of the commissioners, Jessica Rosen-Warsall, who is a Democrat on the commission, warned that requirements run roughshod over state and local authority and constitute extraordinary federal overreach. With the number of lawsuits that are going on in the country, I plead with the Planning Commission to think a little bit more deeply on the changes that need to be made to the Burien Municipal Code in regards to small cell facilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person on the list is Tim Foley.
My name is Tim Foley. I live up on 16th Avenue. I spoke last week about health concerns over the 5G network and also overheard the paid Verizon expert give his opinion on the health concerns for the 5G. I would also like to note that he was not a doctor, nor was he a scientist in any health related science. So I do want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. Also, he talked about the data that he gave on the Verizon cell towers was essentially a research lab, one cell station. It was actually not a real-world application of what we have here in Burien, which is 6 current cell towers, radio frequencies from radio stations, as well as radio frequencies from the radar at the airport. A couple points I would like to make today is I do have Verizon. I am a Verizon customer. I have full bars in the town and in my neighborhood, and I can stream 100% without even using my home Wi-Fi. So I started asking the question, what is this 5G really for? What is it capable of doing? Why are they pushing it as strong as they are? Initially, I came into this looking at it from my science background as a health concern. But in the last week or two, I've kind of found some other stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to share that I found is that it has the ability to map its environment in 3D real time. So instead of actually having video cameras around, they can actually go through and do 3D imaging in real time with these cell towers. So they can and will know when you leave for work, when you return home, and when you're walking your dog. Another thing that I found is that it's operating on the frequency of oxygen, our most valuable resource in the air. So the third diagram there basically shows, on page 3, it's basically showing that 98% of the energy that is given off from these towers is absorbed by oxygen. It changes the molecular structure of oxygen. Why do they do that? That is a question that I have that cannot say. They have the ability for cell towers to reach several miles, one cell tower. What is it that stops this at 500 feet? It's its interaction with oxygen. Oxygen is what stops it. So if you look back on the previous page, I show the oxygens basically have 12 electrons that go around them. When this 5G interacts with it, it changes the structure of oxygen. So how does that affect us as humans? Well, your cell is like a keyhole that accepts keys, whether it's nutrients or oxygen. So your oxygen gets absorbed into your cell when the cell recognizes it. If the cell doesn't recognize the oxygen, it essentially goes from an aerobic cell to an anaerobic cell. Do you guys know the name of a cell that survives and replicates in an anaerobic state? That is what eventually will happen to us. It's called cancer. That's well known. The next point I want to make is I found some strange stuff that other people had mentioned, that this 5G network is currently being used as a weapon from the Defense Department. They point it at crowds to get them to feel like they're on fire so that they disperse. The question I have is, if we're putting this in our neighborhoods, how are we to know? I mean, what if this gets hacked? There's hackers out there. Is this not an immediate threat to our environment, to our community? Do you want this outside your home? I mean, anybody, even if you work for Verizon, do you want this sitting outside your home? I don't think so. The other thing that I looked at is, why do we need all this more information and processing of data? And it eventually led me to look at artificial intelligence. I didn't think that I would ever be standing up here talking about artificial intelligence, but the reality is the major corporations like Google, Facebook, and Lockheed Martin are planning on that, and they have been planning on that for several years. And this 5G is the infrastructure to bring this artificial intelligence to our world. Facebook and Google actually released artificial intelligence a few weeks back. I don't know if you guys heard how that went. Essentially, the program itself started reprogramming itself 1,000 times faster than its original programmer could do. It started performing its own task, and what scared the hell out of Google and Facebook is it started communicating with other artificial intelligence systems on their own, in their own language. They couldn't tell what it was saying. They shut it down as fast as they could. This is scary. This is all reality stuff that we're facing. So I ask you, on the very last page, I know you guys aren't the city council, so you can't throw out Ordinance 679, but you can follow suit of what other cities have done, which is make sure that these nodes that is written in the code are 500 feet away from a home, 500 feet away from a business, and 1,500 feet away from a school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Got this gentleman next. Please state your name and address.
My name is Jim Locklear. I live up on 18th, up in Burien. Lived there for 25 years, raised a couple of kids, and love the area. I guess the thing ongoing with this small cell for 4G/5G, it's we were told that Verizon pulled it back, but we really don't know what's happening other than the fact that this new FCC edit came out today. It doesn't sound too good, and I think it's fairly consistent with the way our federal government has been run recently, from the EPA to the FCC now coming down and basically carte blanche saying, yep, go ahead, put in the 5G network, put in the infrastructure. This is too important for some people who have issues with it being too close to their house. Get it done at all cost. It's the emails I've seen, it's public record emails that go on in the business here. And a lot of it really sounds slightly fraudulent, or even at least unethical in the manner that things have been pushed along here, where the city council didn't really know a lot of the stuff going on, or you guys didn't know, you women and men didn't know really what was going on. And we have an attorney for the city of Burien. It seems like there's some legalities that aren't being tended to properly. And I think the big thing is that the planning fellows want to get systems in here. And what have we got to do? Okay, we'll cut some corners. At any rate, if I could just read, I've got some information on the new FCC thing that came out, but basically the FCC issues orders squashing cities and towns' authority to regulate right-of-ways for 5G. So today, the FCC passed an order limiting cities' review of 5G deployments. Meanwhile, the Burien Planning Commission will be asked to vote on approving changes to the city municipal code on wireless facilities that both Ogden Murphy Wallace, or the Visors, and Community Development Director and Telecom Tower Building expert Chip Davis should have known better to do in advance of this coming. All 4 FCC commissioners supported the rules except Jessica Rosen-Warcel, who's the Democrat on the commission, who warned that the requirements run roughshod over state and local authority and constitute extraordinary federal overreach. Cities all over the country will be issuing lawsuits. Burien is being advised to gulp the poison Kool-Aid at the expense of residents because they have in code updates pointed all the small cell deployments at residential areas, contrary to what smarter city leaders are asking for nationwide. Instead of working with our state and local partners to speed the way to 5G deployment, we cut them out, Rosen-Warcel said. We tell them that going forward, Washington will make choices for them about which fees are permissible and which are not, about which aesthetic choices are viable and which are not, with complete disregard for the fact that these infrastructural decisions do not work the same in New York, Iowa. Rosen-Warcel also called the new rules an extraordinary federal overreach that will lead to lawsuits that could hinder efforts to lead in 5G. I do not believe the law permits Washington to run roughshod over state and local authority like this, Rosen-Warcel said, and I worry the litigation that follows will only slow our 5G future. Residents should attend this evening Planning Commission meeting at 7 p.m. to demand a stop to the misinformed decision-making. For one thing, Ogden Murphy Wallace needs to retract its statements to the Planning Commission telling them 5G cells will be directed into busy intersections and apartment complex area when City Council is taking guidelines written by the same firm to exclude the downtown commercial area and other commercial areas and only target residential right-of-ways. Before it looked like residents would get hit with a small cell on a pole in their front yard, the new FCC order sets up the cards for carriers to put up new poles, change the height of poles and the breadth of poles wherever they want. A cluster of boxes on the poles and on the ground, noisy and unsightly. This is just one of many complaints to come in the wave of expected lawsuits. Burien should be participating in the lawsuits, not serving the bidding of our development director's former wireless clients. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening again. Jen Greenstein. I live on 18th Avenue Southwest in Gregory Heights. I only know about this issue, well, because once I was here for something else, I'm here a lot, but also because of my neighbors. People don't know what's going on. My own partner, when I left home, didn't really understand this issue, somebody who's very active in the community. We are counting on you to protect us. I ask you to protect us. I ask you to protect my neighbors. I ask you to protect the children in schools in Burien who will be bombarded with this stuff. It's invisible. I am really concerned. I came here concerned. I'm even more concerned after what I have heard. And then I hear, decorative poles? I don't know if I understood all that, but you know what? I don't care what the poles look like. This is about money. What do we need this for? I also agree, like, my stuff works. What do we even need this for? What, to control the people, to spy on the people? I'm not even on Facebook. I have never been on Facebook. I don't want this in my neighborhood. Resist, say no, no way, no way, no small cells in Burien.
I do not trust the government or the FCC. Look who is running this government. They're turning everything inside out to just to make money for their cronies. Enough. Enough. Please protect the people, protect the children. Do whatever you can in your role to protect. And I would like to thank you for the work that you do. And I would also like to thank the people here who spent clearly hours and hours doing research. And I would just like to say, ditto, 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 ditto. Everything you said sounds so sound and clear and important. And I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone else who's not on the list to speak at the public hearing that would like to take an opportunity to speak this evening? Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing and public comments then at 7:54. If everyone has had the opportunity to speak that would like to do so. Thank you for contributing and speaking what your thoughts are as a citizen of Burien. Thank you. Okay. Next item of business, which will be under old business, is a discussion and recommendation of the Personal Wireless Service Facilities Code Amendment. And to start the Commission's discussion will be Senior Planner Tara Johnson. She'll provide a presentation summarizing the proposed zoning code amendments.
Good evening, Planning Commission and members of the public. We're here tonight to continue on with our discussion on some of the outstanding issues that we did not have an opportunity to address at the last meeting. Last meeting was dedicated primarily to receiving public testimony as part of the public hearing process. And now that the public hearing piece is closed, I want to walk through some of the items that have been included in your packet, as well as highlight some of the changes that you'll see that you've seen included as part of your packet in the draft code before you this evening. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, we've closed the public hearing that was continued from the 12th, and then the next step is, of course, to have the Commission provide an official recommendation. The next step would be moving on the code amendment to City Council for their deliberations, and then final adoption once they're able to identify any outstanding issues and concerns. So we talked a little bit about this, and I believe several members of the public have also addressed this as well. The new FCC preemptive ruling that came forward earlier this month was voted on today and approved today. As you know, it made some modifications based on our consulting attorney's advice and reading of the draft order. We've made some modifications to the draft code in anticipation of this going into effect. So I just want to highlight some of the modifications that you see in your code included in the packet. So there have been revisions to several sections of the definitions to meet the FCC's new definitions for antennas. So you'll see modifications to that language in your draft code. Also, an amendment to the definition of how co-location reads as well. And then small cell antennas, and this is one of the biggest issues. My understanding is there's several definitions included in the draft order, or 3 different interpretations of how small cell antennas read. And so we've included some modifications to the language there. Another significant change that you'll see in the code, we had previously required a pre-application meeting as part of the review process. Any new small cell facility or personal wireless facility modification would be required to go through a pre-application meeting process. And now the FCC has ruled in this draft order that is to be voluntary and not a requirement. So what we've done is modified that language to reflect that and be consistent with that, where we're highly recommending it and encouraging it, but not requiring it. So that in essence are kind of the high-level changes that you'll see. Of course, there could be additional changes once this order goes into effect. We don't know the extent of the ramifications of the changes. And so as it moves forward, hopefully through City Council, we may have some minor modifications. And as you heard from a couple of the wireless providers this evening, they intend to provide some additional comments. Also included in your packet were comments received from Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. We've incorporated some of the comments into the draft code where we were in agreement, and there were others that we did not incorporate, as you heard this evening. So the two outstanding issues that staff had asked the Planning Commission for specific feedback, and I believe that was a couple meetings ago. Number one was restricting new facilities, new monopoles that would locate small cell facilities within the downtown commercial zone. And that was something the wireless providers had concerns with. The other issue was restricting small cells from being located on decorative poles. So those were the two issues that we are requesting at this time feedback from the Commission on, and also an opportunity for discussion if you have further questions on any of the items included or amendments to the code.
Tara, with the FCC's decision today and anticipated final notice in the next few days, is there a time frame that we have to move forward with this for consideration as this plays out and likely goes through lawsuits over the next year or two? Is there a requirement that we move forward with these code changes now? Is there a time frame that we have to have them done by? I know some other things that we're considering this year we have to do by 2020 or by a certain time. Is there anything that mandates we move forward now?
There is nothing other than we don't have any regulations that specifically speak to small cell facilities. So if we have AT&T wanting to come in and locate new wireless facilities that are small cells, or go through the eligible facilities process, which is already in effect under the Telecommunications Act, we don't have regulations in place that address any of that. And so we're sort of hanging out there because we don't have regulations that are consistent with the FCC.
So would it then revert back to the process that Verizon received for its application around Lake Burien? Would those rules apply since we don't have a new set of rules in place? Would the evaluation be the same?
We don't have those rules in our code. We don't have them codified. All we have is a franchise agreement in place with Verizon. And just with Verizon, not with any of the other carriers. And so the intent was always to have regulations that are consistent with the Telecommunications Act codified in our code. We don't ever want to be in a situation because that opens us up to lawsuits.
Is it also, just to clarify, if we don't, because one of the things I'm thinking about is the design guidelines. If we don't adopt something, is the situation the communications companies can still come in with their application to put these in, but we would have no design guidelines in place, so could they theoretically sort of use whatever design they want?
That's accurate, yes.
So currently, that's what's in place. That they can do any design they want if we don't.
Well, we don't have any specific criteria in place, yes.
I mean, I would lean toward, I'd rather have some criteria, so we have a say in the design.
Yeah.
So, I guess for me, as far as the two issues you've brought up, I think, as we talked about, I think both of these are reasonable. The downtown commercial zone is kind of a unique area, in particular with moving toward undergrounding facilities. I think this makes sense. And then I definitely think, I don't even know how it would be feasible to put these on some of the decorative poles we have, and I frequent Old Burien quite a bit, so I would definitely not want to see them there. A couple of the other issues I wanted to address,
the number of facilities that could be on each pole. And then we have something in there around director having discretion. I gotta pull up the language, but it was basically, I think the application could be denied if it was deemed that there were like too many in a certain area. We brought that up, and so I was kind of wondering if the language was clear enough, because it didn't really have a clear criteria, like how many per block or anything like that. So I guess even from a legal standpoint, is that kind of solid enough? I think it just says to make sure that it's not visually proliferating too much. So, but yeah, so those are my two issues. So I don't know if you want to start with. It looked like page 12. It says I think there can be multiple facilities per pole. I'm just wondering if we should consider limiting that. Others have thought about that. I was a little concerned, are we going to have every different company wanting to put one of their cell facilities on, every pole? That could get really cluttered visually.
Right, the language in here states that it was previously doesn't exceed 4 cubic feet, and the language is being changed to 28 cubic feet. That's substantial.
Well, and I think that's to reflect the changes under the draft order. They've changed that.
Can you be more specific?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Excuse me. So with regard to section H on page 12, I think that's what you're referencing.
Correct.
And that's specifically related to what's considered a unified enclosure. And a unified enclosure is an enclosure that places both the antenna and the equipment in one box, as opposed to multiple antennas, and a smaller box down below. And I say smaller in quotations there, because that box, according to the FCC draft definition, can be 28 cubic feet. And so the change to H is to say, okay, if you're going to have a unified enclosure, rather than have antennas and a box, you can have one enclosure, but it cannot exceed 28 cubic feet combined. So it's to put the unified enclosure in the same category as a different type of cell provider who would do antennas plus the box. Did that make sense? Are you so confused?
Well, I'm trying to pick, again, it's always really helpful when we can have visuals of this.
Do you have a picture of the T-Mobile on your?
Is that what we received?
Yeah, I can't get a, is that unified thing going to be up high on a pole or at the ground, or you're saying it's adding the two together?
Where it will be on the pole, I can't say specifically. I can speak to a unified design that I've seen, and I don't know if we have pictures here. No, those are the, T-Mobile's the one that uses a unified design. Typically, and just speaking from the pictures I've seen, they are smaller than 28 cubic feet, and they are towards the top of the pole. However, the FCC definition allows up to 28 cubic feet, and so that is what we're trying to capture here. Not that is the design that we are seeing currently.
So you're just matching the FCC language?
We're matching the draft definition language, yes.
Okay. Is that something that would go in a residential neighborhood, something that big?
It could potentially go in a residential neighborhood on a pole, yes.
And as the FCC, so this is a new ruling, meaning we sort of must accommodate this? That's it? This came out?
And so what ends up happening is if a potential is if you do not accommodate it, then the carriers can challenge you legally and say that your design standards do not match with the FCC definition, and could claim that you are therefore A, violating FCC rules, and B, effectively prohibiting them from using the right-of-way under Section 253 and 332 of the Telecom Act. Where that goes from there is potential litigation.
Okay, and then what about the having multiple antenna per pole?
And are you talking about E, just so that
Yes.
we're on the same
Yeah,
page?
multiple antennas are permitted on a wooden pole, provided that each antenna should not be more than 3 cubic feet.
Right. Excuse me. So, depending again on the carrier, so Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, that's what I'm referring to as carriers. There could be other companies too, but just the ones, household names that you're more familiar with. Depending on the carrier, they have different types of technology for the antenna. Now, you do have a picture here. If you go back a couple to your pictures. Okay. So, and it's small, I'm sorry. But the small cell facilities here shows 2 antennas. And those are, I'm going to scoot over to her mic for a second. So if you're looking at the left picture, then 2 antennas are located at the top of the pole on the second pole, so the farther away pole. So those are 2 antennas. And unfortunately, I'll tell you, I believe it's a gap in the FCC definition. It does not cap how many antennas you may have on a pole. And so it says each antenna it must be no more than 3 cubic feet. But it doesn't say that you can cap how many antennas.
Is that something that's being considered?
I'm glad you asked. I will now move to this one again. I, on behalf of several cities, submitted comments to the FCC, I believe on September 17th, 18th, requesting that they reconsider that definition and cap the number of antennas.
But does that mean we are preempted from doing so? Cities are preempted from capping them?
The definition can be read that way, yes.
So theoretically, so you said you submitted some comments. If it changes, we would then have to go back and change the code in the future.
So,
if you're successful,
right? I am very hopeful that I'm successful. I asked for multiple changes to the definition in my comments. Theoretically, if the FCC agreed with these comments, they would then adopt them as of today. So we haven't seen that new final order, but they would make changes to the draft order theoretically and change the definition, and then before council meeting, we could then incorporate it into this code.
Okay, so it's a faster time frame.
It could be. So the effective date, according to the draft code, is it's 30 days post publication in the Federal Register. Sorry, I don't mean draft code, draft order. 30 days in publication in the Federal Register. Publication in the Federal Register can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, and then 30 days thereafter. Another comment I made is I requested more than 30 days post-publication in the Federal Register, as did other attorneys and national associations, so that cities like Burien would have more time to digest what this order says and make appropriate revisions. So I unfortunately do not know what changes they made. I was hopeful that I could come here tonight and tell you, but they didn't give me that opportunity.
I'm only speaking on behalf of myself when I say this. Due to that change happening today, not knowing what the results of all of that is, knowing that we have concerned citizens and we have a lot that we're trying to digest, and I know we have a lot on our agenda to complete this year, I personally feel we should have more time. That's just my feeling.
Well, I agree. I think overall we should have more time in general, and I understand the desire to adopt something now, to have some standards in place. I think your point is very well taken, but I worry that we don't know how this is going to play out and how this is going to change over time, and I worry about having to go back and change it after we've adopted this if we find that we need to make some changes along the way. And I understand the process where FCC makes changes, but are they the right changes for Burien where we can make the changes where it makes sense for us? And I don't feel we're there yet. So I at least would like to wait until the next meeting to make a decision to see if there's further clarity. But I'm actually leaning right now to making a recommendation of not moving forward at all.
Can I ask, what's the likelihood that your recommendations made the FCC come back with a response, or how fast, or what timeline do you think they'll come back with?
I think they're going to come out with a decision in the next few days, and honestly, I think the likelihood of them adopting my recommendations are slim.
I wonder if an option could be we communicate in some manner, along with our recommendation to the council, maybe these are a couple things where we have concerns around, and should the situation change in the meantime, we would want their decision to reflect those changes. That might be something if we could kind of keep things moving so we don't miss our chance to actually influence the way our city looks, but yet communicate our concerns. I guess I'm just trying to understand what exactly would change that you're interested in waiting for. If it's just this one issue.
Well, personally, I think speaking for me, I think I'm interested in seeing how this plays out at the FCC level and seeing whether at state and local jurisdictions move this forward and tie it up in legal proceedings.
Oh, kind of the fall.
To see if it's favorable, or how that changes things moving forward. If there's not a burning timeline right now, I at least don't see the reason to move forward now. But I don't think we have enough clarity, for me at least.
A litigation timeline, if staff could speak to this, I would think a litigation timeline, though, could be much longer. And we could miss our opportunity and end up with facilities all over the city that citizens have said they have concerns about, but we wouldn't have adopted any guidelines, so they could be things no one really wants. That would be my concern if we don't act.
Right, I too would like a little bit more time. I think both of you have mentioned, I think it's a lot that's in the air, so at least being able to hear what happens, so we can move forward with at least concrete idea of what's happening. But I'm worried if we don't and things get pushed off, are there going to be cell towers that just are a mismatch of different styles and we can't do anything about it? How long is there a time frame that you think that it could go before litigation-wise, before things kind of settle so that decisions can be made? I'm worried that is this going to be like a year of back and forth, and then in the meantime we're going to have 20 styles of cell towers or cell nodes up.
So litigation could take years. Litigation could take years. I cannot predict exactly how long it would take. I also cannot predict whether or not, while it's tied up in litigation, whether or not the courts would put a stay on the rules. I don't know if they would or not. Either way, applications could come in under a larger cell tower timeframes that the Telecommunications Act and the FCC have already acted on. So, for example, currently, we have an FCC shot clock of 90 days for a co-location and 150 days on new facilities. And you have design standards for large facilities in your code that you've had for years. We've made some tweaks to it, but not major tweaks. But they would be then using maybe those design standards, which are made for much larger poles and much larger facilities. And so you would likely still have to process small cell facility applications, even though you have not maybe published full design standards because of the 90 to 150 day shot clocks. So if there is litigation, it doesn't put a stay on the build out of small cell. It just puts a stay on the definition of small cell, the shot clocks that the FCC has put out, and a few other things, including, and I hope, honestly, if the litigation resolves, how the FCC has now interpreted effective prohibition. Because though this is a legal nuance, they totally changed the rules in Washington State and in the Ninth Circuit with this draft order. And so where our abilities are to regulate the proliferation of any sort of wireless facility has drastically changed with this order.
So with these that are happening. And I believe in the importance of setting some standards, to kind of touch on your points there. I believe that's important that we have just some standardized classification for our city as a whole. My concern is, again, is kind of the timeline, but then also too, what might happen. Again, just kind of touching on what my other commissioners have said is, I mean, can we take, I guess at the end of the day, can we take what the FCC language is, and can we add our own additional criteria to that to maybe tighten some of those restrictions? Does that make sense?
Yes, and to some extent we have. So the example of decorative pole and the traffic standards is an example of where the city in this code has suggested tightening those standards.
Specifically, I'm thinking about maybe like heights or distances or things like that, knowing that there's technology that's coming that we have some idea about, but obviously there's enough information that's out there where there are health concerns. I mean,
so with regard to height, it is one of those discrepancies in their code, in their draft code right now. So that's, we've specifically not dealt too much with height in this draft code because of the discrepancy within their draft order on how they define height. And if you read it, it appears that they're defining height at 50 feet, which is taller than your design standards here, except for existing poles that happen to be at that height anyway. But when you think about poles in many neighborhoods here, they're below 50 feet. Neighborhoods, and I mean that broadly, commercial and residential, not specifically. With regard to health standards, your code doesn't deal with health standards, and the reason is due to FCC preemption of that. The other piece that I want to know, and the reason why you see me flipping is to get the actual language in the draft order, but the draft order is clear that it wants the design standards to be publicly disclosed. And so that will be the other kind of catch-22 that might occur, is that if you don't have the design standards in place, then you could be run afoul of this particular issue. And so to be specific, I did find the paragraph I was looking for. They say that aesthetic requirements are not preempted by the FCC if they are reasonable, no more burdensome than those applied to other types of infrastructure deployments, and published in advance.
So given that we're waiting for this to play out, I'd say we table it, making a recommendation until the October 10th meeting. If that's agreeable. And I can make that as a formal motion if we want, because I think we'll have a little bit more clarity there. So I'd like to move that we table making a recommendation until the October 10th meeting.
okay. All those in favor?
I'll second it.
Or second?
I'll second.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Well, I guess just so I can think of that, so basically just give us, that's what our next meeting.
Yeah.
So we might get a little bit more information from FCC.
But there may be a chance that we won't know anything additional by the October 10th meeting.
So I'm just trying to clarify the kind of purpose. Sounds like maybe you're hoping you'll get a little bit more information.
Yeah, for me
a little bit of
personally.
time. Yeah. But one more meeting I wouldn't think is going to do any harm. So, unless staff had any other concerns timing-wise.
Well, we do have we were hoping to get a formal recommendation from the commission so that we could move it on to city council and start the city council review of this code amendment. And then within that timeline, if there were additional changes brought down by this order, we would incorporate it. Council also has, just so you know, council has the ability to hold another public hearing If they decide the changes are significant enough, delegate it back to the planning commission. So both those are alternatives that council has. So, I mean, there's no, I'm trying to think of the right path. Alternatively, council could choose to just move forward with the amendment. And so the planning commission has a pretty extensive workload. That's one of our other concerns with substantive deadlines, the comprehensive plan amendments. We have 4 amendments to work through, just the map amendments. We also have the economic development policies, the housing policies, and then we're starting on the shoreline master program in a couple meetings. So given all that, we really thought it would be good and helpful to have a formal recommendation from the planning commission so we can move this forward.
It's got a second.
Yep.
So
I'm sorry.
the motion's got a second to it, so we should vote on it.
And who seconded, please?
I seconded.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion voted 3-1 to wait until the next meeting to extend it to allow more time.
To the next meeting, to the October 10th meeting, or
Correct.
a later meeting?
October 10th.
October 10th.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and break for a 2-minute recess. Time is 8:25.